Well, thanks everybody for coming out. We appreciate it. Alex and I are really delighted to share the stage and talk about such a powerful topic and really enabling E&S growth. Like, going to come at it from a technical perspective, and that's very much about enabling. First, a bit about me. So as we were preparing for the session, I started to think back about my long career in the industry, 20 plus years serving P&C, and I thought about first settling claims back in Hurricane Andrew and watching the shift of what's happening in terms of the Florida and California market to the E&S market. Helped initiate the initial go-to-market at Guidewire and starting to modernize what you think about as core systems. Had a stint in the Lloyd's market, helping place a lot of E&S risk that comes from the US into that market. And most recently with BetterView, using artificial intelligence to help understand property risk. And that thread was really just looking at what's actually happening in the market. And I'm going to need a clicker. Perfect. There's my guy. And to my current role, which I'm supposed to give you a bit of a plug, which is the perfect. That's simple word for me. It was serving at Novadeya, and we serve exclusively the insurance distribution space. And some of it cuts across brokers, agents, and carriers. And the problem we're looking to solve is the fact that generally you have a back office system known as an AMS. We approached it from the front and said, let's approach it from a sales perspective, give a very nice sales and service experience that's connected to the back end. So I'm Chief Revenue Officer of the company, so I'm supposed to say buy everything from us. But the truth is, if you have something that's working great, solve for it and plug in specific modules. So I'm delighted to be joined by Alex, and he's got a very interesting career arc as well. And you talk about your journey coming into the E&S space.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me participate. I'm Alex. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of PathPoint. We're a wholesale broker focused on the small business excess and surplus lines market. So we sit between retail agents and brokers and E&S carriers and aim to help both those parties more efficiently place and service E&S business. And we've worked with Novadeya for over 3 years now. PathPoint started as a software business, licensing software to wholesalers and MGAs, and then evolved to be a wholesaler, and in doing so realized, oh crap, we need a management system of our own, and sort of launched with Novadeya in 2021 and have deeply implemented them in several aspects of the business. But to what just underline a point Jeff made, like the key thing about the model for us is we do small transactions, so like super high transaction volume, very sales focused on our clients, which are, all around the country. And so having a management system that could couple like a CRM model, like really leaning on Salesforce, with the insurance policy model, and having those live in the same platform, plus all the bells and whistles you get with that in terms of integrations, was sort of key to us being able to come to market quickly and onboard distribution and service distribution and not have fragmented operations under the hood.
Excellent. Thanks for that perspective. So let's think about this for a second. We want to frame the topic, right? So there's growth happening around us, right? Technology enables and supports this growth. But when you actually start to take a look at the E&S market, it makes up 9% right now and $115 billion. So we were just somewhat contemplating preparing for this over the past 10 years, what the year-over-year growth, but it's been incredibly fast. And so it's something that we're going to continue to see given the conditions. And our thought was to maybe frame that and give you an idea to start to think about it's doubling more than the traditional P&C lines. And it starts to frame some of the discussions that we're going to have about why there's some tech barriers and other opportunities for us to collaborate. And I think this is probably very difficult to read, but from AM Best and Insurance Journal basically says the paper that's in the not admitted market likely will stay there and only continue to grow. And that's been a consensus for folks that I've talked about. And so we look at that as how do we help make sure we're supporting the growth? And that's the conversation we want to have today. And by the way, if you have questions, we're going to try to leave a couple minutes at the end to get some of those, and we'll be happy to get to that. So when I start to think about this, we start talking about the barriers of growth in E&S wholesalers. I'd love to kick off with that. Alex, just kind of give your experience there.
Yeah, I think I'd caveat that we're somewhat atypical in that we started from zero and have grown organically, which is unlike how traditional wholesalers typically grow through acquisition or legacy businesses scaling up. But what is like interesting from a systems problem as a wholesaler is like there's just a lack of connectivity between the client and the manufacturer, the insurance carrier, because it's an intermediated transaction by an additional intermediary. That intermediary is like adding a ton of value, market access, outsourcing, compliance, et cetera. But as a wholesaler, you have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of clients on the demand side of your business, and then you have different capacity partners on the supply side of your business. An MGA or a program like may be able to limit their capacity partners to a small reinsurance panel, but you still have this like many to one to many relationship as you're intermediating. And so you have like different operational workflows on the demand side of your business and different operational workflows on the supply side of your business. Like your partners on both sides have different requirements of you, and like those renewals are different, the billing is different, the cancellation processes are different. And so if you really are trying to wholesale, which like means you're offering your agency clients like a storefront of some sort or some expertise on outsourcing, you're going to have to solve for these. And it's time intensive and also difficult as you're growing to make sure you connect these dots in a scalable manner. And so you really need to think about like, what are you going to build yourself? What are you going to lease or rent from a vendor? And then also, where are you going to integrate other parts into that vendor so that you can, ideally in our case, standardize as much of these as possible, because that's where we get scalability and differentiated user experience. A wholesaler going after big business may have a different point of view. But as a, to go back to Jeff's question, like every time you add a new market as a wholesaler, you have to change operations across your business. And it's like change management of your sales force, change management of your underwriting team, change management of your billing team. And you probably have to involve your IT or engineering team, depending on what it is too. That is, that requires like discipline, it requires capital, it requires staff. MGAs have it, they can be focused on a single product or a single distribution source, but as they grow, they often think about opening a, maybe they were wholesale only, now they want to have a retail channel, or they want to add additional products. Each one of those things can take 3, 6, 9, 12 months to sort of bring to market. And that can be challenging when you have earnings expectations or revenue expectations from board or investors.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to contribute here too. This is something I'm really passionate about, because it's actually what led me to Novodea. Having been in the core system space, you realized that E&S was somewhat of an underinvested market in terms of how systems were designed.
Yeah.
And even just talking to a friend, I'll leave the name nameless, she was trying to adapt an existing system for another line of business. It was an over a year investment. And given how capacity flows in this market, it's just a non-starter. So it's interesting when we start to think about the attention that's going to come to this space to try to help with this growth. I think it's a super.
I mean, like going back to the growth, like this is a little macro, and I think the micro is more interesting in trying to solve this stuff. But in 2018, the market was under $30 billion of direct place surplus lines premium. It's probably going to be $115 billion this year. That's just E&S business. Wholesalers also place admitted business. Workers' comp is like heavily intermediated by wholesalers. That's generally admitted. There's a lot of admitted small business that's wholesale. It's like the market size is massively bigger. It's not like NVIDIA size bigger than what it was 10 years ago, but this is like an incredibly dynamic market that is growing faster than the general P&C business. And I think what that's like, just looking at the number of wholesalers and MGAs, like 10 years ago, if you asked a private equity investor, they'd be like, that's all going to consolidate. Like Marsh is only going to work with 5 of these. Everyone else is going to go away. In fact, the opposite is true. Like there are more MGAs, there are more wholesalers, and ergo, like there's more vendors that are bringing better products, better platforms to market, because the ecosystem can command deeper attention, I think.
For sure. And just sticking with the heart of the questions, I wanted to bring up a point and then ask you to comment on it as well. For those of you who are familiar with the WSA conference, our crew went out there and had some really good discussions. One of the top barriers was basically being able to get reports and talk to their capacity providers and their partners about the ongoings of business. It was actually kind of surprising in terms of what that's actually a barrier. So to argue how the actual growth of the book, the quality of the book, the way you've designed, partly with Novadea, but just in general, if you can comment on your 360-degree view and kind of how you think about that with your training partners.
Yeah. Well, like I'll take that example. One way a wholesaler can differentiate to a carrier, although I suspect it works in other ways too, is like you can provide superior risk selection, which is generally a function of better risk segmentation. And in a traditional wholesale environment, like that's done at like a policy level. Like barbershops are different than salons, different barbershops are different than other barbershops. How do we segment that? But like if you build a model where your client data can be segmented as dimensions against your policy data, or the inverse, like you can go to your carriers and be like, here's what our distribution is buying from you. And you can also bring that into your underwriting model and find agents that are bringing you bad risks or bringing you great risks, and you can work with your carriers to understand what segments are driving profitability. That is like, sounds simple, I think, to like retail brokers. Like they're like, yeah, that's obvious. Like we do that all the time. Wholesale data, because the market has moved so fast, because it's gotten more fragmented, and because the systems are like predominantly homegrown, or there's generally like one vendor to rule them all, and these wholesalers, it's like incredibly difficult to like extend the data model to be able to segment in this way. And so there's market pressure, I think, on MGAs and wholesalers probably thinking about this. The other thing that I think Jeff is trying to get me to get to, like our back office, like Pathpoint differentiated on the agent experience and the underwriting model for the carriers. We do a lot of binding authority business for those familiar with the wholesale channel. We didn't necessarily want to differentiate on day one on the management system, the way we serviced a policy. So we knew we didn't want to rebuild a management system from scratch, but we knew that the management system needed to be flexible enough to, like, we are in a dynamic environment, like the requirements of us, again, from our operating partners is going to change. Ergo, our management system, which is like a core technology system to us, just as alongside the core technology we've built ourselves, has to be flexible. And so there's a billing vendor that's integrated into the ecosystem called Ascend that we can run standardized transactions through, but it speaks directly to our management system. It speaks directly to our agent front end. Compliance, we've extended our management system to include, right? So like we've effectively had to, yes, we lean on a lot of partners to give us functionality, but like at the same time, we always underestimate how much core engineering time we put on integrations. And in the heat of the moment, we're like, oh, it'd be great to like tap up those resources to build new products. But usually after the fact, we're like, wow, it was actually great that we kept that team on this back office function and like integrating these parties together, because our clients are like, your renewal experience has gotten not just smoother than what it was for you, but now it's superior to your competitors, basically. And so setting up those, you can't like preordain this stuff, basically. Like you have to be able to react to it. And I think that's kind of why we really leaned into a Novadea, Salesforce, several vendors model. I don't know, does that make sense?
Makes absolute sense. And just talking about the friction, this whole idea of building an open platform or delivering an open platform so you can leverage the ecosystem. Sandeep, who Intellect AI just presented, he's one of our partners and can bring in data to the platform to help use it. The key is that openness gives you the use of data. It's actually a key point of friction too. And you've done a lot within that point.
And like, that's a perfect example. Like we differentiated on submission intake because we brought algorithmic underwriting to ENS and deeply tied that to our submission experience. So like we didn't need to bring in a vendor to look at an existing submission workflow, but we do have 6, 7 other vendors that, I mentioned compliance, billing, and so on. Those are all integrated into Novadea. And our engineering team is doing a lot of that work because the platform's open, working with the product experts there to understand where the roadmap's going and what we can tie together in the future as well.
Absolutely. And the other key point too, we talked about that 360 degree view, but also the portfolio level view. The more data you bring in, you can actually marry that existing submission with the account level data. It gives you an opportunity to differentiate and reduce the friction with your clients as well too, right?
Yeah, and like this is, I'm sure there are people in the audience that are gonna be like, no, you have this wrong. But like the way we think about it, and this really lends into Salesforce architecture, is like it's extremely easy to ETL or reverse ETL data into and out of Salesforce from our data warehouse or other systems. So we don't need to like if we want to report and we like can't do it in Novadea, our hands are not completely tied. I'm not like calling Jeff and being like, our carrier partnerships team needs this immediately, like wake people up to solve this. Like where we can use our data warehouse to get data in and out. It's like another way to think of like, you're probably not gonna get that. Like it can be set up with the legacy vendors, but it is going to be painful to maintain it and they're going to charge you for it. So like it's not build versus buy. Like our perspective is like we build some things, we buy some things, and we're constantly building new things and we're constantly buying new things. And that line kind of shifts around based on usually what our clients are pulling us towards, but it could be operational in nature too.
Yeah, perfect setup for the buy versus build, which I'm sure folks in here are wrestling with. What do I do? Is it one or the other, or maybe both?
Yeah. I mean, I've only done this once, so.
Successfully though, given your growth story.
I don't know, we'll see. Our perspective is it's both, like basically what I just said. The wholesale market is growing so quickly, like you can still get an MGA in market completely on a buy, but you have to really understand like you've probably really nailed your underwriting model, your product differentiation if you're doing delegated authority business. You probably know exactly what your distribution channel is going to be, and you're like highly opinionated about that. And you're like, I'm not going to put any of my capital on building novel technology. I'm just going to put all my capital on getting this novel product built, managed, and in market quickly. Anything beyond that, certainly anyone that's like trying to make a point about efficiency-based differentiation, which is like a technology-based differentiation perspective, I think it's like you may start out thinking you're going to build it all yourself. Your sales team's going to mutiny at some point and tell you they need to pull functionality forward. Or you're like, I'm going to buy it all yourself, and then 2 years into it, you're going to be meeting with the board, and they're going to be like, why can't we do this? And they're like, oh, we can't do it because vendor XYZ hasn't built it yet. And they're going to be like, wait a second, that's a corporate risk right there.
Yeah, and I think the conversations have evolved in the market too, where like folks like Novadea, we can support a hybrid environment where if you have something you're building, we could work around you and or have existing platforms you may not want to touch right now. So it can be very much a work in progress environment. I think sometimes there's so much consternation of like the big bang. I would argue against, you don't need to take that approach. You can really solve for specific problems in increments.
Yeah, like, I mean, we're going through a Novadea upgrade right now, and all the conversations around how do we avoid a big bang here? Like, how do we run a blue-green deployment, or how do we get something in various workflows sooner? And like, that's been critical for us. I think one of the learnings though, unlike the buy versus build, is even though we bought a management system, we realized that we needed to have core competency around at least Salesforce architecture and Salesforce development, if not actually Novadea's sort of like perspective on what they're building and what their clients are getting value from, like in our engineering and product teams. It's not to say that our engineering team is like all Salesforce developers constantly tinkering with it, but if we allow our engineering teams to be like, I don't need to think about Novadea at all, what we ended up getting was like very siloed implementations. And again, go back to like a feature is not just like a feature that agents see. A feature has to power like issuing a policy, servicing a policy, placing a policy with the paying taxes on a policy. And so you have to make sure that you're willing to invest in the human capital internally that's like going to leverage the vendor. In our case, we're very opinionated about Salesforce and Novadea, right? But whoever it is, that they become subject matter experts on that. And not everything is just like, oh, just go ask the vendor. Like you should expect your internal people to have some level of sophistication around at least on these core back office systems, and be self-sufficient in understanding the model.
If there's something you would do differently, what would be a lesson learned that would be very important for the audience to know about?
What would I have done differently? I only have 2 minutes. I think we would have brought a Salesforce architect in sooner and put in more reps and spending more time with the Novadea team earlier in the relationship, and not just like standing monthly meetings, like really 10 hours a week type thing to make sure we were doing the knowledge transfer, like really expensive stuff. Like we have always, again, underestimated the difficulty in implementing things and integrating together, but always been very pleased with the payoff, I guess. I think we it's like easy to want to get the product in market and start distributing, and you should do that to make sure you have like your product market fit. But there were things where we could have tied our thought more broadly about what our back office could be and done that sooner rather than sort of like building the plane as we were flying it. That's like kind of like philosophically impossible in a venture-backed startup environment where like all the pressure's on growth. But as you think about it as an insurance business, which like generally every insurtech that's in the value chain should, you do want to have an upfront model of how you're going to operate sooner. I think we could have saved time had we done that too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one I wanted to call out too is having seen thousands of these implementations is focus on your point of differentiation is a big, big key. And we're seeing that where if the problem's not in the back office, go to the front or the middle where you have an opportunity to differentiate, but really start to think about that.
The problem could be in the back office.
Possibly, yeah, definitely. Yeah. But the traditional view is that, but start to think about it. I think that was quite innovative where you differentiated it on submission ingestion. We're seeing more and more folks look at that and start to look at the customer experience. And oftentimes my thought is that tends to get lost when you get into some of these back office. It's important, but your point of differentiation should come through at some point too. You've done a great job of that.
Yeah, like and as a startup, right, you're not thinking about like gross margin improvement through your management system contract. You're thinking about like, does this give me the ammunition to start de-risking the business, which is generally going to be around growth and building distribution.
Excellent. I think we did it right at time. So small round of applause for Alex. And I want to thank him for his partnership and his opportunity to share some of the stories here.